Welcome to MetroSTL.com. I'm Charles JACO. We're pleased to be joined today by St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Wesley Bell. Mr. Bell, welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us. I wanted to start with this new initiative you've been working on domestic violence. What was the genesis of that? Why did this suddenly move to the front burner?
Obviously, we had a couple of tragedies where we lost um, children and mothers on Christmas Day. You may have been aware of that, been aware of that case also. And then a few days ago, another killing of a wife, two innocent children, and one thing that we've been big on is the community engagement piece, and we make a point to um, um, do outreach with our community, so we know what the pulse of the community is. And one thing that was coming back to me, feedback that was coming back to me, that I've long been an advocate for it, but it was coming back, particularly with these cases, was that um, that idea that we continue to blame the victims, we continue to couch this issue in the terms of why didn't she leave, why didn't she do anything wrong, as opposed to how we should be framing the question, why did this individual abuse another? And so I think it's important that we bring awareness, that we not only make certain that victims of domestic abuse know that they're not alone and that there are resources for them, but more importantly, I think it needs to be clear that we all are in this battle against domestic violence. That means family, friends. If you know someone who is prone to abuse, and oftentimes people on the front line are those family members and friends who know individuals, I think the onus is on all of us to get involved early before the abuse starts. If we can direct that person to get the help that they need, and if the violence has started, then it's on family, friends, loved ones to contact law enforcement. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, that yes, you may strain a relationship, but you also may save a life.
Um, Besides family and friends getting involved, which is something we've heard about for decades, in terms of the public policy end of this, police, prosecutors such as yourself, what are we not doing that could be done in terms of a matter of public policy in the realm of domestic abuse?
I think there's always things that we can all do better. Unfortunately, much of this domestic violence crisis, much of what leads up to it is upstream of the criminal justice system. So although there are things that our office, law enforcement, can do better, and we're going to continue to do better, we've created a domestic violence advisory council. So we work with domestic violence advocates so we can make certain that our policies are in line with best practices, and that we're doing everything we can. But also, much of this stuff happens upstream. By the time it gets to our office, tragically, oftentimes damage has been done, be it abuse or worse in what we saw. In this case, once the deceased who was killed reported it, law enforcement was tracking this individual down. As a matter of fact, Charles, they had almost got him earlier in the day. But they were unable to. She was contacted to let her know that he was out there. No one knew that if he was coming, but law enforcement contacted her to let her know, to make sure that she was taking precautions to get out the house if she could. But again, it's not her fault. She didn't do anything wrong. She was at home.
Right. So what do you think police and I apologize, but what do you think police and prosecutors should be doing is not being done? Again, you can try to depend on the kindness of family members and friends to drop a dime on a perpetrator and say the person's being beaten. But do you think that the law enforcement mechanism could be more proactive in terms of either encouraging women, because it is mostly women who report domestic abuse, or being proactive once the reports are in and acting immediately? Do we as a society fall down when it comes to that sort of reaction?
I think we all can do better, and I think that yes, law enforcement, prosecutors across the country can can take this more seriously, and not to say that they're not taking it seriously, because they are, but yes, there's always things that can be done better. But there's another side of that. Oftentimes, when law enforcement is contacted, and the reason why victims oftentimes don't are afraid or intimidated to contact law enforcement is because once they do that, sometimes they're in more danger because the abuser sees that they're losing power. They see that they're getting that the victim is getting help, and so sometimes that makes the victim even more at danger. And so, yes, I want to be clear. The reason that I've been speaking out about this, the reason why our office has taken this so seriously, working with the Domestic Violence Council and others, is because we want to do everything that we can to make certain that we are um, helping and assisting and prosecuting abusers so that we can protect victims. That said, when someone shows up in body armor and semi-automatic weapons, um, you know, tragedies like these are unfortunately, um, the possibility is there. But I think that yes, we need to invest more resources um, um, in treatment on the front end, identifying these individuals on the front end prior to abuse, and making them when we can um, get treatment or deal with these issues. One thing that the law allows us to do is prosecute even when a victim in the case does not want to cooperate, and victims have legitimate reasons why sometimes they don't want to prosecute off fear of intimidation. They may have children um, with the abuser, and all sorts of things that play into this cycle of abuse that we see all too often. Um, and so, yes, there's more that we can do, and we do need to dedicate more resources to this crisis. And I'm gonna call it what it is. It's a national crisis. We knew that this was going there. There was likely to be an uptick across the country, particularly with the pandemic. Our office has tried to meet that. We've over the last several years, we roughly received the same amount of referrals. It's been consistent, domestic violence referrals, but we've prosecuted 30% more cases. And one way we're able to do that is when victims aren't willing to cooperate because of intimidation, we are, if we have the evidence, because the law allows us, if we have the evidence to move forward without their cooperation, we're going to move forward. As a matter of fact, the first trial of the year since the pandemic was a domestic violence case in which the victim cooperated with us but did not feel comfortable testifying. And we proceeded with the evidence that we had, and we were able to secure a prosecution. Um, but that said, Charles, it can't just stop at law enforcement. Yes, law enforcement has to take this more seriously. Yes, law enforcement has to be more proactive, but this has to be something that we're all involved. Domestic violence is not an issue for her or a victim. It's all of us that have to be involved.
How hard is it then to get community buy-in? How hard is it to convince friends, relatives, neighbors, beyond just supporting the woman, to maybe be the ones who initiate the call themselves? Because you and I both know what the dynamic of families generally is. They will give advice to somebody, but hey, that's none of our business. It's not our family. We're not going to touch that, even if there's violence involved. How do you think that would work, and what would it look like to convince people that domestic violence is such a real threat that they should notify the authorities on that the same way they would notify the authorities if they were suspecting drug activity or child abuse?
It's going to be difficult. Again, um, to the point that you made, it's always going to be difficult to get family members, loved ones, close friends to report their loved one to the authorities. It's just hard, and oftentimes we tend to be in denial of our own family members. So sometimes it's not necessarily intentional, but that's why I think it's important for individuals like myself with a platform, and everyone for that, no matter how large or small your influence is, we got to make sure that people are aware of the problem. And I think that that's why it's important for you to do stories like this and other media outlets, so we can reach more people and educate people on why it's such a problem and why it's so important. 1 in 4 women who are murdered are killed by an intimate partner. Of the murder suicides, 94% of the victims are women. And so, yes, victims can come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, but disproportionately, they tend to be women. And so we need to call this issue what it is. And it is and instead of putting it on women and saying, oh, this is just her problem, no, let's put it on men. Hey, we have to step up. We oftentimes know who that friend, that family member that's prone to anger, and when a relationship just doesn't look right, or a victim is shown, or a intimate partner shows up with unexplained bruising or injuries. It's on us because disproportionately men are the abusers. And so, we're going to advocate for any victims, but at the same time, we want to make certain that people are aware, and that I use my platform to educate and continue to push forward.
The weapons of choice are generally firearms, which gets me to the last part of this before we run out of time. These domestic abusers generally don't beat somebody to death or stab them to death. They shoot them. The Missouri legislature right now is in the process of loosening some of the loosest gun laws in the country. Right now, because of Missouri gun laws, I know I've spoken to several officers who say we can stop a car full of guys and they've got guns in the car, and 3 of them are felons and 1 isn't, and the guy in the back seat who's not a felon can claim, oh, all these weapons are mine, and we've got to kick them loose because of Missouri's gun laws. The latest iteration is making it legal to carry weapons on mass transit, and indeed carry weapons almost any place, including houses of worship, daycare centers, schools. What does that do to you as a prosecutor, and what does that do to the cops who bring cases to you faced with state law that makes it legal to carry weapons almost anywhere?
Just as a caveat, there tends to be an escalation in violence. So it starts with physical abuse. Then we see it escalates, and you are absolutely on point with that question, that it escalates to guns. And when you have an influx of guns into communities where we see disproportionate number of people suffering with substance use disorder, disproportionate number of people suffering with mental health issues, and all other types of issues, and then we add guns everywhere. There is a reason why Americans are more likely to suffer or be the victims of gun violence than any place else in the world. There's a reason why we see the highest rates of gun violence, and we see a continuation of this increase across the country. And from a law enforcement standpoint, it makes it very difficult to prosecute cases because, and some of you may remember a case that happened a few years ago when I came in office, where an individual was at a restaurant. The two were in an argument, and the argument ended. The victim literally tapped the gentleman on the shoulder and said, "Hey, no hard feelings," walked away. In which, at that point, as he's walking away, leaving the bar, the assailant, or if you will, makes a derogatory remark, knowing that the individual is going to come back. And before he makes that derogatory remark, he sticks his hand in his pocket, because this is on video, and you can see him reaching for his gun. And when the guy comes back and the scuffle starts, he shoots him. And in that case was very difficult for us to prosecute. Matter of fact, we got a hung jury. We ended up working out a plea deal because we weren't going to let it go. So we worked out a plea deal. So the individual did some jail time, but I believe that should have been a conviction for murder. But because of the loose gun laws, the fact that we are Missouri trending toward being the wild, wild west, it is making it difficult to prosecute these cases, and it makes us all less safe. So I could not agree more.
Quick final question then. Would it make your job as prosecutor easier, but more importantly to the general public, would it make St. Louis County safer if, and it's not allowed right now, but if localities were able to pass their own gun legislation that was more stringent than it was in the rest of the state? Do you think that would make people in St. Louis County safer and make things better from your point of view?
Listen, I do think that it would help, but I think it would be a Band-Aid. I'm a big supporter of Moms Demand Action, and their whole platform is about common sense gun laws. We're not saying that you shouldn't or can't own a gun. Practice and that's in clients come in with cash and clients who are charged with crimes. You don't always feel safe. So I understand there's times, but why not have to go through the registration process? Why not have background checks to make certain we know who has a gun? I mean, you get a driver's license, you got to go through these hurdles, but to become a lethal weapon, you can just go out and get a gun and with no problems. And I think that, again, as Moms Demand Action so eloquently states in their platforms across the country, common sense gun laws, background checks. And yeah, I'll settle for allowing municipalities more discretion. Hey, if that works, but what I would rather have is universal background checks. I would like to make certain that if someone is going to bear the responsibility of having a gun, that they're trained and that we know who it is. We have no flag lists for airplanes, but yet with guns, individuals with documented mental health issues have no problems getting them, and that's got to change.
St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Wesley Bell, thank you very much for joining us today on MetroSTL.com. It's our pleasure. Good to talk to you again.
Always a pleasure, and you have a great one.
Same to you. Thank you for joining us.